The Battle for Restoration. The conflict of reintroducing the endangered wolves to Yellowstone National Park. Since the colonial times, wolves have been portrayed as beasts and savages. For example, children's books such as The Little Red Riding Hood or The Three Little Pigs, all of which gave off negative impressions about wolves. Wolves were going extinct in the U.S. as a result of the torturous thoughts and actions of people. For instance, in 1884 Montana, where they had a bounty on wolves, where people would receive a reward for killing them. But in 1966, an idea was presented to bring wolves back to Yellowstone. However, there were many controversies, arguments, debates, and protests about this. Not everyone saw the environmental positivity wolves brought us. Reintroducing the wolves took numerous years until the wolves were finally reintroduced in 1995. The conflict between gray wolves and their supporters, including naturalists, against the ranchers and hunters who saw them as pests, put wolves on the brink of extinction. The reintroduction of wolves was a developing compromise that later led Yellowstone's ecosystem to flourish.
In the Bible, New Testament, Matthew 7:15, they state, "Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." Perhaps the breaking point was when King Edward, in the 10th century, allowed citizens to pay taxes with wolf heads, or when a penny per wolf was instituted by Massachusetts Bay Company in 1640, where the price was up to 40 shillings. Even Native Americans, who idolized and preserved wolves, began to use their bounty to their advantage. Wolves were leaving the earth in the blink of an eye. Wolves disappeared by 1776 in Scotland and Ireland, and in the 1800s, New England. Humans did not always kill wolves directly with guns or traps. As America began expanding west and building railroads, they began taking up grazing areas of bison with buildings for railroad workers and the railroads themselves. This expansion caused the bison's numbers to plummet, which had a chain reaction on other animals, including wolves, as bison were one of the wolves' top prey. Theodore Roosevelt, an empowering activist and our 26th president, called wolves a beast of waste and destruction. Wolves were a constant prey for humans from the 1850s to the 1880s. They were massacred, one of the worst in the American West. In the 1930s, the idea of what a predator was changed, as biologists took a deeper look and developed insight into our ecosystems. This knowledge began to challenge the evil views people had on wolves. In the 1960s, liberalism and protecting the environment became very popular. In 1972, Clean Air and Water Acts were commenced. In the 1970s, the first Earth Day was celebrated, an annual awareness day for our environment and ways to limit waste and grow more greenery. Around the same time, the government finally took action and placed many struggling animals on the endangered species list.
Because of people, wolves were going extinct almost everywhere in the U.S. For example, almost 140 wolves were killed by their own protectors, park rangers. Without wolves in Yellowstone, the ecosystem was failing because of the many animals that depended on the wolves. The coyote population was expanding thanks to coyotes' top predator being the wolves. Foxes, badgers, and martens' population declined because of the competition of smaller prey with the coyotes. Doug Smith says, "The wolf is a keystone species. Remove it and the effects cascade down in the grasses." However, thankfully in 1973, wolves were included in the Endangered Species Act, which protects them from the harm of humans. Finally, the idea to reintroduce wolves was conceived, and many people were in favor of this, especially people like naturalists. However, many people also, mostly farmers and hunters, were against this, worried their cattle and other animals would be harmed or even killed.
Wolves do not kill for sport. That is a fact. Why? The average wolf weight, if we threw all the wolves together, males, females, subadults, adults, pups, is about 100 pounds. The average cow elk's 500 pounds, the average bull elk's 750. They risk injury or death. When you attack something 5 to 7 times as large as you, that ain't a fair fight. So they risk tremendous injury or death trying to take something on bigger.
They also worried the elk population would disappear, causing the hunters to be enraged. Some said if the wolves were introduced, they would shoot, shovel, and shut up. They also mentioned they felt wolf recovery was being shoved down their throats by rich city people living far from any ranch. And they have the luxury of not worrying about livestock losses. The restoration was finally put into action in 1995 after multiple debates. In the winter of 1995, 29 wolves were transferred from Alberta, Canada, and held in pens until March 31st. These wolves were named the Crystal Creek Pack. Roughly 7 packs, 41 wolves were reintroduced. The transferred wolves fed mostly on the overpopulated elk, bison, and moose. The reintroduction later became known as one of the most successful reintroductions in history. Although many people were furious, many wildlife defender groups paid $3,000 to anyone who lost cattle due to wolves to solve this. And another group spent $15,000 to build an electric fence to protect calves. With the wolf population thriving, a compromise was made with hunters which removed wolves from the endangered species list, even though many naturalists and animal supporters disagreed with this. The compromise created a level playing field for both sides and brought things back to normal.
The reintroduction was expected to last around 5 years. However, no wolves were released into Yellowstone after 1996, a tribute to the early success of the reintroduction. In 1998, over 90 wolves had been spotted in Yellowstone. 20 years after the reintroduction, the wolf population ascended from 300 to 4,000. Wolves increased the well-being of the environment and other species. When the wolves were first eradicated, the elk became overpopulated, which caused overgrazing of fields. With the wolves back, the population of elk has gone back to steady levels as the naturalist had hoped for.
Wolves eat elk. So do cougars, so do bears, so do coyotes. A lot of things eat elk. People eat elk. And so the system in many ways hinges on elk. So what wolves and other carnivores do to elk is very important. And very simply, prior to wolf recovery, predation pressure by natural carnivores was very low. No wolves, no cougars, few bears. Bears were here, but their numbers were lower. And that caused the elk population to grow to very large numbers. In fact, a lot of ecologists and scientists criticize Yellowstone for having too many elk.
Wolves typically only ate 90 of a 225 kilogram animal, leaving the rest for scavenger animals, causing the number of scavenger animals to go up. The coyotes also overflowed in numbers while the wolves were absent. However, with the return of wolves, the population of coyotes cut in half, which was very beneficial for the park. With the elk being killed moderately, it brought back vegetation which is used as homes and food for numerous animals. In areas where wolves hunted, deer avoided, which quintupled the sizes of trees in just 6 years. With newly created forests, the birds began returning to Yellowstone. The number of beavers increased because of the vegetation's success. The beavers, with their building skills, created habitats for other animals. The number of mice and rabbits increased because of the decrease in coyotes. Other predators of the mice and rabbits, like hawks, weasels, foxes, badgers, ravens, and bald eagles, numbers increased as well. Bears' population rose because they were scavengers off the wolves' previous meals, and due to the bears eating more meat, there are more berries available for other animals. However, one of the truly fascinating things is how the wolves changed the rivers. When they came back, rivers became more narrow, new pools formed, and more riffle sections developed, all of which is very positive for the environment and different species. The wolves creating new forests stabilized the riverbanks, creating a more thorough, narrow, less eroded river.
Gray wolves were quickly going extinct throughout the U.S. since the late 1800s. This problem was given a resolution with the reintroduction of wolves. Many people disliked this idea and made sure to express their irritation. Compromises had to be made before the wolves could reintroduce to the Yellowstone ecosystem. When the wolves were reintroduced, the Yellowstone environment showed an almost immediate reaction and developed into a lush wilderness. Farmers saw this differently, however. They were furious with the slaughtering of their livestock, and in return, solutions were made to fix this. Multiple wildlife defender groups became involved when they offered compromises, like paying the farmers for the lost cattle. The conflict between defenders of wolves and others that disapproved of the wolves was an ongoing disagreement for many years. Many different solutions were made to create compromise between the two different groups until both sides were nearly satisfied. Although today not everyone agrees with it, the wolves are back and here to stay.